We've now got energy for a photon blast, shouted Jeff Long. Direct it right at the back of Bob, shouted Callisto. Fee cried out with horror. What about my city? Down in the city, Bob continued to carve on Newton's neck, making the loud, booming Godzilla-like roar as he carved. Good thing Bob chose to turn his hand into a dull knife, shouted the crewman Doug Davis. The crew of Mutiny couldn't stand to see what was happening to their captain. Get out of there, Newton, they vainly shouted at the viewing screen. Forgive me, Fuyu, said Callisto, but Newton is too important here. He then turned to Obacopa and shouted, Fire. And a bright, glowing bolt of energy shot down out of Mutiny and struck Bob in the back. There was a loud, sonic boom of an explosion, followed by tons of dust and sand that filled the air in a large cloud. The explosion of Bob killed just about all in a 2-mile radius. When the cloud of dust diminished, Newton was standing 500 feet tall in the ruins. As another mountain of dirt formed right in the heart of the city. Bob is coming back, shouted Sheena. It's hopeless, said Major Matt Mason, the non-mutated clone of Newton. Get out of there, Newton, commanded Callisto. As Bob formed, Newton shrank. When Bob was complete, Newton was back to his normal size. Bob walked over to the cowering Newton, who was looking for a place to fly off to. Bob raised his huge sandaled foot over the wide-eyed Newton and was just about to crush Newton out of existence when suddenly Newton was beamed back aboard Mutania. The crew ran down to the transporter room to check Newton out. I'm fine, said Newton, as his neck and throat began to quickly heal back up. Thanks for using some of my energy to distract it like that, but what about Bob? Can we stop him from destroying the city with the reabsorbed energy? Down in the city, Bob made a loud roar of the sentence in its native tongue that sounded a lot like Godzilla, like a Godzilla roar. Its cap glowed a rainbow of colors. Those familiar with the glowing cap knew what that meant. Fuyu, who stayed on the bridge, turned away, knowing what it meant also. Bob opened its newly bearded mouth, that was now gray, and the Godzilla-like spray it had for destroying cities, for past rebelliousness, shot out, catching city block after city block on fire. The giant Bob then walked about, kicking, crushing, and smashing what was left from the fight it had with Newton, fanning the flames in the city with its giant flowing white robe. Mutania fired down on Bob a second time, using a weaker bolt of energy, hoping that if it was weaker, there wouldn't be such a devastating explosion like the last time. But still, the same bomb effect occurred, destroying more of the city. When Bob formed again, Newton demanded that they try using a phaser beam on it, but the same thing happened again, destroying even more of the city. When the phaser... weaken the phaser beam even further, demanded Newton. But, even though the beam was hardly destructive at all, Bob exploded like a huge bomb and destroyed just about all of the city. But that was a weak phaser beam, shouted discouraged, sad Sheena. Callisto shook his head a little and said, strange. It's deliberately self-destructing, making it look like we are using powerful weapons against it, against the inhabitants of the cities be damned. It's as if it's trying to get the Popnars to think we don't care about where or when we attack Bob, just as long as we attack him. No doubt, this is Bob's way of trying to create fear and alienation in the minds of its slaves toward anyone who might try to free them from it. And Bob suddenly came out of the ground again. Newton just stood on the bridge. He shook his head from side to side and said, it's damned if we attack, and it's damned if we don't. We can destroy Bob, but in the process we just kill and hurt the innocent being that it deliberately hides among them. No doubt it will forever now hide among them, making it so we kill its victims if we tried to kill it in our attempt to free its victims. Like a cancer, said Obakoba. A few minutes later, it was hard to see anything due to all the smoke and fire. On Mutiny, the crew just stood stunned. They couldn't believe the recuperative powers of Bob. Newtin had failed horribly and caused the death of thousands of innocents in his effort to protect a city from such a hideously oppressive monster. Now all the crew of Mutiny could do was watch. A couple of hours later, Newtin was back in his throne, looking exactly like he did before the fight. Jeff Long walked up to Newtin and said, "Newtin, why don't we leave Bob and Ramadar alone? Ain't no way we can beat them. They be too strong for us. Know what I'm saying? Well, it was a cool fight. Not as cool as the one you had with Quetzalcoatl, but cool all the same. Know what I'm saying? That fight was both shocking and iron. Know what I'm saying?" Newton looked depressed and said, "Maybe you're right, Jeff. It might not be possible to free the people down there. After all, Bob apparently is too powerful. If we could find the planet it came from, or where it comes from, this planet Ramada, then I bet we could destroy him. But where is it located? And of course, is there even a planet Ramada? That might be a lie as well, brought about from the glowing being who you talked about. This parasite is probably nomadic and doesn't even belong to any planet." Callisto came onto the bridge and said, "I think we've been going all about it wrong, Newton." "What do you mean?" "From what we witnessed, and from what you described from your meeting with all the helpers, if you kill them, you just make more of them. And let's face it, you, apparently, aren't strong enough physically to take Bob on, even in ultra-mutant form. But in the fight, we noticed something hopeful." "What's that?" Newton asked his alien friend. "We definitely detected a decrease in energy coming from the invisible force field that surrounds the Golden Dome everyone is forced to face, including Bob." "A force field?" Newton asked. "Yes, and the invisible energy seems very powerful," said Callisto. "However, if you hadn't become ultra-mutant, I feel that we might have actually had the power to burn through the shield and destroy the absorber with phaser fire." "But we don't anymore?" asked Newton. Callisto looked a little shifty-eyed on Newton's question. Newton then looked embarrassed and said with anger in his voice, "Are you saying that because I became ultra-mutant, we now no longer have the power to destroy the absorber down there?" Callisto nodded yes. Newton closed his eyes. Callisto then said, "If we just studied the Golden Dome a little longer, before you decided to go mano-a-mano, as you said," Newton cussed and shouted with fury, "a city would still be there." Newton got out of his throne with clenched fists of fury. "I feel so stupid," he roared. "Is there any way we can still destroy the absorber?" Callisto thought for a while and said, "Sorry, Newton, we had our chance. But we now lack the energy to destroy the absorber, since it feeds off of those who look at it. Maybe we could keep them from looking at it." "How are we going to do that?" asked Newton, thinking he was dealing with the impossible. "By putting out a broadcast from Mutania that is so strong on all channels that no matter where they turn the dial, they'll get our message in video form, telling them to refuse to obey Bob." You know something? I think I'll put that there.